U.S. Army War College published a scientific study that claimed black men lacked the intelligence, the coordination, and the natural courage to fly a combat aircraft. It was a document of state-sponsored psychological warfare designed to keep black Americans on the ground. But in 1941, under massive pressure from the NAACP and the black press, the government was forced to launch what they called the Tuskegee experiment. They weren't trying to build legends. They were trying to prove their own racism correct. They expected us to fail. They were dead wrong. The experiment took place at Moton Field in Alabama. Between 1941 and 1946, 992 pilots were trained at Tuskegee. But these weren't just pilots. For every one man in the cockpit, there were 10 on the ground. Mechanics, navigators, and instructors, building a self-contained black Air Force in the heart of the segregated South. The 99th Pursuit Squadron, led by Benjamin O. Davis Jr., was the first to deploy. They arrived in North Africa in 1943 with everything to prove and an entire military brass waiting for them to crash. Their own commanders tried to have them removed from combat, claiming their performance was unsatisfactory. The unfiltered truth? Those reports were written by men who were more afraid of black excellence than they were of the Nazi Luftwaffe. In 1944, the 99th merged with 3 other squadrons to form the 332nd Fighter Group. To distinguish themselves in the sky, they painted the tails of their P-51 Mustangs a vibrant, defiant red. While other fighter groups would often abandon the bombers they were supposed to protect to go hunting for German kills to pad their stats, the Tuskegee Airmen stayed in formation. They were disciplined. They were professional. They became so good at their jobs that white bomber crews, men who wouldn't have shared a water fountain with them back home, began specifically requesting the Red Tail Angels for their missions. Now, let's get unfiltered. There is a long-standing myth that the Tuskegee Airmen never lost a bomber. History shows that isn't true. They lost about 27 bombers to enemy fire. But compare that to other fighter groups who lost hundreds. Their loss rate was significantly lower because they refused to leave their post. They weren't fighting for glory. They were fighting for the right to exist in a country that wanted them grounded. They flew over 15,000 individual sorties. They destroyed 112 German aircraft in the air and another 150 on the ground. They even sank a German destroyer with machine gun fire. They earned 150 Distinguished Flying Crosses. The most heartbreaking part of this history is what happened after the war. These men returned to America wearing medals of valor, only to be told to get to the back of the bus. General Daniel Chappie James Jr. famously stated, "We fought 2 wars, one against the Axis powers and one against the prejudice at home." But their excellence was undeniable. Their combat record was the primary weapon used by civil rights activists to pressure the White House. In 1948, President Harry S. Truman signed Executive Order 9981, officially desegregating the U.S. Armed Forces. The Tuskegee Airmen didn't just win a war in Europe, they forced the United States to live up to its own constitution. The Tuskegee Airmen proved that when you give a black man a cockpit and a mission, he doesn't just fly, he soars. They turned the experiment into an empire. I want to hear from you in the comments. Why does America love to celebrate the red tails in movies, but we rarely talk about the 1925 military study that tried to ban them from the sky in the first place? Is it easier to celebrate the victory than to acknowledge the sabotage? Share this video. Every time you see a plane in the sky, remember the men who had to fight their own country just for the right to defend it. Hit that follow button and join us at Black History Unfiltered.